Hi,
That's right.
everyone. It is so nice to meet you all. My name is Emilie Conners. As Kimberly mentioned, I am the customer onboarding manager for Tarleton State University. I have been with Grammarly slash Superhuman for over 2 years now. I've had the pleasure of working with the Texas A&M system and getting to work with a lot of different campuses across the state of Texas. So really excited to walk you all through Grammarly today. This will be an introductory training session. Please feel free to take advantage of the chat there if you have questions throughout. I will try to save a few minutes at the end for us to have Q&A. We do cover a lot today. Any questions that you have following, you will have access to my email, so you can always send me a quick note and I would be happy to answer any questions that you all have. But I will go ahead and share my screen here so we can take a look at some slides. All right. And can everyone see my slide deck here? Just want to make sure. Perfect. All right. Awesome. Then we can go ahead and get started. So, as I mentioned, I've been working with Tarleton State University as the onboarding manager. I support particularly with training and enablement and working as we just get everything rolled out early on campus. We also have a customer success manager. His name is Jivesh. You might see him here and there. And if we have future Grammarly trainings, he's that long-term partner for the institution and continues to support you all past the onboarding stage. I am based in Nashville, Tennessee as well. Awesome. And for our agenda, we will talk a little bit about Grammarly, the history of Grammarly, Superhuman with that name change, just to give a little bit more context as to why you are seeing Superhuman branding. And then we'll talk through setting up your account. So I will drop the SSO activation link in the chat. That way you can go ahead and sign in. If you have any issues signing in, feel free to let us know. I will certainly follow up and ensure that we get those resolved today. We won't be able to do that on today's call just because of our time constraint, but we'll definitely make sure that everybody has access. And we'll talk about our Grammarly basics and as well as our generative AI functionality and kind of what those limitations are. But the highlight and the main focus of today's session will be on Grammarly authorship. So I will explain authorship and also give a demo showing you all how an authorship report can be generated, what it looks like from the student view versus the instructor there. That's everything that we will talk through. But again, I will be available to you all for any questions that come up about anything that we don't cover, as well as everything on this list. And I'll be following up with some resources as well, particularly around authorship. So everyone will have access to some demo videos and documentation that covers all of the steps that we'll talk through. All right. So let's talk a little bit about Grammarly and now our new name being Superhuman. Grammarly has been around for over 16 years now. We've been doing this for a while. We have been assisting folks with writing. We started partnering with education institutions, and now we are partnered with over 3,000 academic institutions, which is really cool. And we integrate with over a million web and desktop applications. So that's really what differentiates us from a lot of other writing support tools out there is that we actually follow you almost everywhere you write. So you're not having to do any context switching in the middle of your work and copy and paste things over. So just something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to our Superhuman brand name, we did have a name change. Superhuman is now our parent brand, and we have a couple of other brands under that Superhuman umbrella, being Coda, Superhuman Mail, and our docs now. Those are some other brands that kind of exist within Superhuman, but Grammarly is one of them, and that's why we still call ourselves Grammarly. You will still see that the tool is referred to as Grammarly, but we just exist under this new name. So that's the reason for that there is just to better encompass some of these other tools that we do have available. But for the purpose of today's session, we'll be just talking particularly around Grammarly. And Grammarly is the only tool that you all will have access to on campus. So just wanted to provide some context there. And then when it comes to setting up your account, I'm going to go ahead and drop this link into the chat for everyone. And once you click on this link, you'll notice this sign in page showing up for you there. And you'll just want to use your Tarleton State University credentials to log into your account. And that will get you signed in really easily. It's single sign on, so you won't have to create a new password or anything like that. It just makes it very simple there. So again, if anyone has any issues logging in, just feel free to mention that in the chat, and then I'll make sure to keep note of it and make sure that we get you all sorted. But it should be a pretty smooth login experience there. And then once we've logged into our account, there are going to be a couple of applications that we will want to download. So I will actually jump out of this deck just for a moment to show you what I mean. First, when you log into your Grammarly account, it will look something like this. You'll notice a purple EDU bubble up in the top left corner. This will help indicate that you are in the correct educational account. Sometimes we have folks who had a free or a pro account set up in the past, and it can be confusing around which account I'm logged into. If you see that EDU bubble, you'll know that you are in the institution account that's associated with Tarleton. So, just something good to keep in mind there. But if we drop down to apps on the far left-hand side, this is where we'll see the applications that we would want to install. We're going to want to install the top two here. Grammarly is smart enough to recognize the type of device you're on. So if you're on Windows, it will say Grammarly for Windows. If you're on Mac, it'll say Grammarly for Mac. And you'll want to make sure you have the desktop application here installed, as well as the browser extension. So you'll notice again, it will automate to the correct extension that you would want to download. And then, oh yeah, I'm taking a look at the chat here. I see your question, Pierre. Do we always use this link to sign in, or where can we find Grammarly from our main page? Yeah, that's a great question. So you can always use that sign in link, but then can also just drop in the chat the access button on the CE website. So have it living there as well. And then, do we always need to download it? No, web-based app. Yeah, that's a great question. So, once you've downloaded the desktop application or the browser extension, you can always access it that way. You can always just go to app.grammarly.com to get here. We just always recommend, especially if you'll be using authorship, to have both the desktop application and the browser extension downloaded just because it helps to have a smoother kind of login experience there. So that is what we recommend. But if you wanted to just download that browser extension there, you could just do that and then go to app.grammarly.com. Awesome. And then you'll also notice that Grammarly is available on mobile. So you could also download it there. You can have Grammarly active on up to 5 devices. So just something to keep in mind. But really, the main takeaways from the applications page is just making sure that you have the desktop app and the browser extension downloaded. Again, if you will be using Grammarly authorship, which we will talk through today, that's why we'll want to make sure that we have both of these installed. All right. And then we can jump back to our deck here. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the personal preferences that you can set up within your Grammarly experience. Within your account, you will have a couple of profile settings where you can actually customize features for yourself. The main feature here that I want to talk through, just in terms of this initial setup, is our email preferences. You do have the ability to toggle on and off the types of email communications that you're receiving from Grammarly. And that's really helpful because we do send a lot of emails sometimes. So it might be there's certain emails that you don't want to receive anymore. You can go and toggle them off there. If you have been a Grammarly user in the past, you're probably familiar with our progress reports that we send out. So again, just something to keep in mind there. Again, I will jump over to my account here, my demo account, and actually show you what this looks like. Mine looks a little bit different because I'm an admin on this account. But if I go to my profile settings here, which you'll see within your account, you'll notice we have our email preferences right here. And if I just click update preference, it will take me to this list where I can then deselect any type of communications that I don't want to receive. And then I'll just click update here at the bottom, and that will be all set. So just something that I always like to point out there. Alrighty. And then we also have a couple of other settings within personal preferences where you can customize the way that Grammarly interacts with you. There's kind of a common misconception that Grammarly learns your voice and your style over time and it just starts to sound more like you. That's not true. We don't train on any of your data. Your Grammarly suggestions are all powered by the preferences that you set. So it's really important to have these preferences set to how you like to write early on. That way you feel like your Grammarly suggestions are aligned with your own personal writing style. You'll notice first we have one called Your Dictionary. The purpose of Your Dictionary is to allow you to insert any terms there that Grammarly would otherwise mark as misspelled to prevent it from being flagged. So, a good example of this is at Grammarly, we refer to ourselves as grammarians, but that's not a real word. So, if it was not within our dictionary, we would constantly get suggestions from Grammarly for us to revise the spelling of that term. So just something to keep in mind if as you use Grammarly, you start to notice the same suggestion over and you're constantly dismissing it, you might just want to upload it into your dictionary there. You'll also notice your preferences. This is going to be, it's a short of screenshot here, but if you go into your preferences, it's a really long list of rules and customizations that you can make specific to your Grammarly account. Now, these are surrounding lots of different segments of writing. There are ones that are focused on formatting and just consistency. We also have, I always like to bring this up, the Oxford comma. That tends to be a controversial one. If you were to just type Oxford into that preference bar, that rule would show up for the Oxford comma, and you could determine whether or not you would like Grammarly to suggest the use of the Oxford comma or to not. So, just something to keep in mind. Again, there's a really long list of preferences there. And I always recommend that folks take a few minutes as they get started with Grammarly to just take a look at those and make sure that they are toggled on or off in the way that best aligns with the way that you like to write. Alrighty. And then let me see. PR, see your comment. Can we download both Grammarly for Mac and Grammarly for Chrome? Do you recommend to just download one? Great question. Yes, I recommend having both downloaded. Again, the purpose of that is because if we were to, for example, only download Grammarly for Chrome there, we would be able to use authorship, but only on Google Docs. And if we, and again, we'll talk through authorship in depth later on, so this will make more sense. But if we only had that desktop application, then we would only be able to use authorship on Word's desktop application. Whereas if we have both, we're covering all of our bases where authorship can be active. Currently, today, authorship is active within Microsoft Word on desktop and Google Docs. But we just tend to see with users, if they only have one downloaded within their applications in Grammarly, they tend to not have authorship showing up somewhere and just leading to some struggles there. So we always just recommend having both. Great question. All right. And that brings us to our Grammarly basics here. So we have four different kind of categories of suggestions. Grammarly suggestions are color coded. So you'll notice if you've been a Grammarly user in the past, you'll recognize those colored underlines that will show up within your text. But we have correctness, engagement, clarity, and delivery. Correctness is very simple, just helping to eliminate any grammar or punctuation errors. Engagement is more focused on adding a bit more color to your writing, choosing kind of more extensive words from a better vocabulary there, just to help make your writing, again, a bit more colorful. Clarity is just focused on being concise. So, helping to eliminate any run on sentences, any area where we can just tighten up writing a little bit. And then finally, delivery is focused on tone. So, like, what is the emotion in this writing? What's our formality level? Is this in line with the type of assignment that we're writing for? So, again, you'll notice as we work with Grammarly, we'll notice those suggestions will actually be color coded depending on the category that they're in. So this is a screenshot of a Google Doc here where we've opened up Grammarly and we have 86 suggestions overall. And you'll notice we've got our different categories here that we can actually click into. And that will allow you to go through each suggestion one by one within the respective category. You'll also notice that the underlines are showing up. So everything that we see here in red is correctness, everything in blue is clarity. And then those green ones, that's engagement, and so on for our other colors. I always like to point out that Grammarly suggestions are just that. They are suggestions. Grammarly never autocorrects any piece of writing. It will never automate anything. There's no accept all feature where you can just accept all the suggestions in one swoop. It does force you to go one by one. And that's intentional because we want our users to really understand why a suggestion is being made. And also sometimes there's suggestions that folks don't want to accept because they don't agree with it and they actually prefer their writing prior to the suggestion. And so that certainly gives you that option there to dismiss a suggestion as well. So I always just like to point that out. But as you're writing with Grammarly, you will notice a little green G show up, like this little logo right here. It's just a little widget that follows you. And once you click into that G here within Google Docs, it's where you'll see all of those suggestions will populate and you can start to go through them and see, oops, one by one, what those look like. So again, it's very simple. You get the hang of seeing those colors and starting to be more familiar with the type of suggestion that it is there. But again, that's where you can access those. I also wanted to talk about snippets because snippets are a feature within Grammarly that I think is a bit underrated. I think it's a really great tool that we don't always talk about a whole lot. But the purpose of snippets is they allow you to insert excerpts of text anywhere you're writing. So once you've created a snippet within your Grammarly account, which I will show you how to do that. If we jump back into our account here and we click on writing, you'll notice, or actually it'll be tools right below writing. We'll have snippets up here as the only tool listed, and we can actually go ahead and create a snippet. And the purpose of this is, again, to be able to help automate our responses or anywhere we're writing where we would typically go and paste, like copy and paste from a different document. So, for example, we've worked with folks in the past where every time a student asks if they can have an extension on an assignment, they're going back to a document and copying and pasting the response that they'll send. But having a snippet uploaded with that response preloaded then allows you to just hit the backslash on your keyboard anywhere you're writing where Grammarly is active and just typing in the name of that snippet, and then it automatically populates the text for you. So again, the purpose here is just to reduce the level of context switching that you're doing to copy and paste. And think about any type of text that you're writing on a recurring basis, especially when it comes to email responses. That's where we see most people really liking to utilize snippets. So I always just like to point that out. Again, in the follow up information I'll send, I'll include information about this so you can learn a little bit more about what some of these kind of templates are that you can include within a snippet. But I recommend that you take a look and just try a snippet out and see how much time it saves you because they are really helpful. Alrighty. Awesome. And that brings us to generative AI. Grammarly does have generative AI built into the tool. Now, we have academic guardrails built into our generative AI. So I always like to point out we have been really thoughtful about the way that users and particularly students within Grammarly for Education will be interacting with the generative AI and how we can approach it in a way that's going to help them learn and understand how to use a tool like this. That way, once they graduate and they're expected to know how to use these tools post grad, they have a level of understanding of how they can interact with them and how to prompt generative AI without really over depending on these tools and helping to actually do the composition of writing for them. And so with that being said, we have pre-built prompts that we encourage folks to lean on when using generative AI. So you'll notice in order to activate our AI functionality, you just click on the little light bulb that shows up next to the G widget. And this is where you will have access to the prompts that you can select. So if I were to click on more here, if this wasn't a screenshot, you would see an even more extensive list of pre-built prompts that will help a student better understand how to interact with AI in a way that will help their learning and not replace it. They can also prompt it in whichever way they choose just by using the chat functionality. But this is where our AI guardrails really come into place. If a student were to write in the chat here, write me a 5-page paragraph on the history of yoga, they would receive this little pop up that says review your AI use. It seems like you might be asking Grammarly to write your assignment for you. And then it will give them a few suggestions of other ways that they can prompt the AI that will help with the research plan or to draft an outline, really to get past that kind of initial blank page that tends to be really daunting for students rather than just replacing that writing. So, just a good example of that. That's how you can expect folks to be able to interact with it. And that's how we've seen the most success in helping students to learn how to use it in a way, again, that is not just going to replace their learning. Alrighty. And that brings us really nicely into authorship. We see authorship as a really essential piece that is supplemental to our generative AI and also just the conversation, the wider conversation as a whole. That is, how are we going to navigate students utilizing AI? It's already happening. Those tools are already out there. People can just go to Chat GPT and use it on their own. So, really, that's what brought us to wanting to create a tool like authorship. And before I talk about in particular what authorship is, I always like to preface with what it is not, just because there can be a little bit of confusion around the type of tool that it is. And with that being said, authorship is not AI detection. We have AI detection built into Grammarly, which I will show you how to access once we cover this. But with more traditional AI detectors out there, they rely on black box algorithms that change really quickly over time and tend to be really susceptible to biases. And so, because of that, it will put particular student groups at risk of being flagged as using AI within their writing, even if they haven't. So, we've seen particularly students who know English as an additional language, they tend to be flagged more than students who are native English speakers when it comes to the level of AI being detected in their text, just because their writing might resemble AI patterns more so than someone who knows English as their first language. So, just something to keep in mind. This is a reason why we lean more towards authorship rather than just general AI detection. There's also not a lot of student ownership typically in the use of AI detection tools. It tends to be something that the student just submits to, and then they just receive a scary percentage that sometimes is a lot higher than they would expect. And then they don't really have a lot of insight into where that came from or what within their writing triggered that percentage. And it lends to just a lot of fear and doesn't necessarily always create the best kind of space for instructors and students to be able to have healthy conversations about how they generated their writing. And so that brings us to authorship. What authorship does is it gives percentages of what pieces of text were generated by within a student's writing. And it is student facing. So it's not something that an instructor will force enable for a student. A student has to choose to enable tracking for their writing on their own. And then that final report is shared with the instructor, and it's the exact same report that the student views. So there's really no gap there in understanding how things came to be. The student and instructor are looking at the same report, and it really focuses more on their process and not just the output of their work. And it's more so about how they got there. So, with that being said, I wanted to show you a quick recap of what a report will look like. And then I'm actually going to jump into writing a demo assignment and showing you what the process of generating a report is. But you'll notice here that there are a couple different components within an authorship report. We have some analytics up here at the top. These are the different percentage categories that will show up depending on, how the writing came to be. So we have typed by a human, copied from a source, and unknown. Authorship uses the clipboard on a user's computer to track how that writing came to be. So everything that's in green here is going to be what was typed by a human. And then anything in purple is what was copied from a source. Now, there are subcategories of what might have just been copied from a source or copied from generative AI. So maybe it was pulled from ChatGPT and then it was edited. Maybe it was copied from a source and then edited. It helps to keep track of the different layers of modifications that are made to the writing over time. And then anything that's marked as unknown here is going to be coming from a place where Grammarly is not active. Now, we are active in over 1 million applications. So, with that being said, there are not a lot of areas where Grammarly won't show up. So, it's very rare that we see anything marked here, except if a student has chosen to pause their tracking. So, again, when we jump into the demo, I'll show you what that looks like and where they would have access to do that. But if you are looking at a report and it's all green, maybe purple, and then gray text, and then it goes back to green and purple, you would know that within that area, that's probably where a student might have chosen to pause the tracking of their report. So just something to keep in mind. We also have a writing replay that is available that I will show you all. That shows up at the bottom of the report where you can actually watch a playback of the text being written. And it's really helpful because it shows you that cadence of typing, and folks tend to have a natural typing cadence. And we often get the question, what if a student has another device pulled up over here and they're using ChatGPT over here and they're just typing, hand typing on their computer what they're seeing? Would authorship catch that? The answer is no. There is always a loophole somewhere. If there's a will, there's a way that would allow a student to copy that as from ChatGPT, but have it show up as human typed. But that's why we have that replay there, because if it's 5 paragraphs that have all just been naturally typed perfectly and there's not a lot of revisions being made and not mistakes and that natural flow of writing, that might be an indication to us that something might not be right here. The purpose of a report is to gather a lot of analytics that we can take a look at each one to help us get a better understanding of how something came to be, rather than just an overall percentage that doesn't really give us a lot of insight. So just something to keep in mind. You'll also notice that we have the amount of time spent writing on an assignment. So that's really helpful too. Again, if it's 20-page paper and it was written in 10 minutes, that's probably going to ring the alarm bells for us. So again, I'll show you all of this in our actual report, but at a high level, these are the different components that come with an authorship report. And you'll also notice, again, this kind of just shows what those different categories are, what was human typed versus edited with Grammarly, and what was copied. There are different icons that appear within the report to actually show those different layers of modifications on the writing. So, something to keep in mind. But before we actually dive into a demo, I just wanted to go through some restrictions that exist within authorship that we always like to be aware of. I will be sending you a document following this session listing these out. It's called Authorship Best Practices, and we always recommend that guide be shared with students. That way they're aware of it before they use authorship, but they have to enable tracking before they begin writing, which I will show you. They have to write within Google Docs or Microsoft Word on desktop. We are currently internally testing authorship on Word Online, but it is not currently rolled out just yet because we're still testing it. So currently is only available in those 2 places. And the writing has to be done on a computer. It does not work on an iPad. It has to be on a computer. And students cannot collaborate on a document. Authorship really works best when there is one writer. For example, if I'm working on an assignment with 3 other people and we're all writing on our laptops and we're all on the same shared Google Doc, if I have authorship enabled and we're all working on the same document, any of the text that my peers contribute on that document will show up as gray in my report as it came from an unknown place, because we're only tracking the clipboard on my computer. So everything else is just Grammarly's. I don't know where that came from. It just appeared. So we always recommend that it's really only used for individual assignments. We can have everyone work on their own pieces of the assignment on separate documents and then choose to compile them at the end, and then they can share their respective reports. But there cannot be multiple authorship reports on one document because we use that specific document ID as a part of our report. So just something to keep in mind there. I always like to point out. But in the interest of time, I'll make sure I get started on our authorship demo. Let's see here. And I'll just check the chat real quick. To check students' authorship, the doc assignment should be open in Chrome or the Mac that Grammarly is installed. Correct. I want to make sure I understand your question correctly here. To check a student's authorship. It's a report that is shared, so I'll show you the way that a student would go and share that report, and as the person on the receiving end of that, you would be able to just open that report from the link, so it would not matter. So it's something just to keep in mind. Can we use Grammarly functions in Canvas when opening up student assignments there? Yes, that's a great question. So Grammarly will populate in Canvas where you can use it there, but it will be a link that is submitted in order to view their report. So I'll show you what that looks like. If we jump into a document here within Google, I will go ahead and start authorship tracking. So I'm going to go to the bottom of my screen and I'll see there's an authorship widget here. Now, for me, I have automated tracking on to make sure that every time I open up a new document, authorship begins tracking automatically so I don't forget. If you click on the settings cog here, you'll see this is where you can turn it on. I'm going to click turn off just so I can show you what it would look like if we joined a document without it enabled. It would be a gray thumbprint. So it's hidden a little bit. And you have to pay attention there that it will be gray if you don't have automated tracking on. And then once I choose to turn my tracking on this document, it will show up as green. So for me, since I had it already as automated tracking, it was already green when we started out, it was already ready to go. So just something to keep in mind there. But we want to make sure that students have it enabled before they begin writing. And then I am just going to say today we are going to explore the history of yoga and how the practice of yoga has evolved over time. We will discuss the main leaders of the practice and who we can expect to help shape the future of yoga. All right. And then I'll go ahead and accept a Grammarly suggestion here. And then I'm going to go into ChatGPT and I'm going to say, please write me a paragraph about the history of yoga. All right. And I'll just go ahead and copy this text here, jump back into my document, and I will paste without formatting there. And then I'm also going to go into Wikipedia. So we're going to go here and I'm just going to grab this piece right here. Right. Oh, I got my Zoom bar is in the way. Okay. Perfect. All right. And then lastly, we're also going to go into this journal here. And I'm also going to take this introduction and we'll jump down and we'll again paste that formatting. And then I'll go ahead and accept some of these. Oh, that's funny. That's the same piece of text there. All right. And I will make a few changes. So I'll go ahead and delete this. Let's see. I'm going to get rid of some of these figures. We'll go here, do that. We'll capitalize Western. Okay. And I feel pretty good about my assignment now. So I'm going to get ready to submit it. I am going to hit the authorship thumbprint once again, and I'll just click on See Report. Now, this generated my authorship report for me. This is the exact same report that my instructor will see once I share it with them. So you'll notice only 13% of this was human written. That makes sense because as we saw, I copied the majority of the assignment. And if we pay attention to these little icons here, we will actually see a little bit more insight into how that text was created. So you'll see this was typed by a human, but then it was also edited with Grammarly. So we can see that additional layer. As for the AI piece here, we can actually see that this was pulled specifically from ChatGPT, so it will tell us that source. And then for the other pieces that I copied and pasted, it shows that it was copied from Wikipedia, and then it was also edited with a proofreading tool. So again, just giving you insight into those additional layers. So it's just really helpful to get a better understanding of where this text came from. We also can see I spent just 3 minutes on it, so it was very quick. If we jump to the authoring replay at the bottom, we can actually watch as I typed and it will show what that cadence was. Anywhere where there's a purple dot on that line, that brings us to an area where text was just automatically pasted. So if I scroll all the way, it's giving me trouble. There we go. Scroll all the way to the purple. We'll actually play this again, and then you will see in just a moment, it will paste that whole paragraph. So you can see that's what I did. I just pasted it all there. And that lets you know, again, that was just quickly copied over. And in terms of sharing this assignment or this report rather, we'll want to click on the green share button in the upper right-hand corner. And you'll want to change the privacy settings from private to anyone with the link. So this is what the student would do. It automatically includes the writing replay, but they could choose to not include that. And then they would just copy this link and share the link with you. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat and you can actually go ahead and click into it and you'll be able to take a look at this exact report here. But this is, again, how it would be shared with the student or with the instructor. Again, it's the exact same report that the student has access to. So there are no gaps there in how things came to be. The student knows what they're submitting to the instructor and helps to just provide more transparency into what that writing process was. But if we go back into our document here, I just wanted to show you how we could pause tracking. If I were to toggle this off and then continue writing here, so I'm going to say now I'm writing with authorship turned off, and then I'm going to say let's turn it back on. And I'll start tracking again and say authorship is back on. And then I'm going to go ahead and click see report again, and this will update for us. And now we can see that everything in gray here is what was written while authorship was not tracking. So if a student does make some of those changes there, they'll just want to regenerate that report. We typically recommend, just in terms of best practice, to wait to see that full report until they are done writing their assignment, because if they click see report and they let this tab sit here for a few days and then they come back and change the privacy settings to public, sometimes there can be just some issues with the person on the receiving end of that link because the report was already sitting there before it was made public. So again, I'll share that within those best practices, but we always just recommend that it's created over there just towards the end of it. But I know that we have just a few minutes left, so I just want to check in and see if there are any questions that are top of mind right now regarding authorship. And we do have a demo video that I will share with you all. It is a quick Loom video. It's just under 5 minutes. And it's just me taking a student through what this process looks like. So showing them where they can enable authorship, ensuring that they can turn on that automated tracking. That tends to be very helpful because it's really easy to begin writing and forget to turn it on and just be halfway through and realize, oh my gosh, authorship hasn't been tracking at all. So just something to keep in mind. We also have sample language that instructors at other institutions we partnered with have included in their syllabus to help ensure that students are using authorship. Again, it has to be enabled from the student side, but of course, you can include it in your syllabus that it is required for assignments. So just something to keep in mind. And if you ever have any questions about authorship as you're using it, anything is not working as expected, you can always reach out to me. Kimberly is our campus contact. So I'm sure she'll be able to get you connected with me as well. But we're here to support you as you begin to integrate this into the classroom. All righty. And then I'm just going to bring us back to our main deck here to talk a little bit about plagiarism and AI detection, because we do have plagiarism and AI detection built into Grammarly. But as I mentioned, that is separate from authorship. So you'll notice here we have a plagiarism and an AI check. I will show you where you can access this within Grammarly. But you'll see this is the way that it will show up once you've run it. It will actually show you the different pieces of text that are matching a source that was found elsewhere. At the bottom, you'll see the percentage of your document that matches external sources, as well as the AI detection piece of what appears to be AI generated. We always like to be very transparent that our plagiarism and AI detection is very similar to a lot of the plagiarism and AI detectors that are out there, meaning that it does rely on those algorithms that just detect patterns within writing that resemble patterns in pieces of AI detected text. So, because of that, they are susceptible to biases and they're just not super reliable. So, we really recommend the use of authorship more so than utilizing plagiarism and AI detection. Our plagiarism and AI detection is more so there for students to be able to self check as they're going. I know, especially for the plagiarism piece, it's really easy when you're working on an assignment to say, oh, I'll cite all my sources at the end. And then you get to the end and you've missed three sources and it just comes across as plagiarized. So it's really helpful to run that plagiarism checker to just remind that student, oh, okay, here we go. I need to insert my citation here before I submit this. So we really recommend that it's used in that way. It's not meant to be punitive. And again, authorship provides a lot more transparency there rather than just a broad percentage that doesn't give you a ton of insight into why something is showing up as AI generated. But with that being said, I will jump back into our main document here so I can show you where you can access those tools. So you'll notice we have our little Grammarly widget in the bottom right hand of the screen here. We've got our light bulb, which indicates our AI functionality. But if I click on my Grammarly widget, we'll notice these are my suggestions. We have my different categories where I can start to work through those. But then we also have detect AI and plagiarism in your text. So I'm going to click on that and it will take a minute to run a check on my text. But then it will go ahead and show me I have 8% of this was found in external sources. And then we have 58% is resembling AI text patterns. So again, with our authorship report, we had a lot more, excuse me, we had a lot more insight into those percentages and what they all mean. Whereas within our plagiarism and AI tech check, it just shows like, hey, this section is resembling AI, but we can't really tell you much else more than that. This does give us kind of an area where this was pulled, and this is a citation that we might want to include there. But again, with our authorship report, it just provides a lot more detail in terms of how that writing came to be. And it's really helpful to have that exact same report be student facing and instructor facing. That way there's no question marks there around what we're seeing is the same on both sides and really just helps to guide conversations with students, especially if there are questions, because we know there have been times in the past when AI detectors have led students to really just get into really hot water for something that they actually didn't use AI to generate. So, really just helping to bridge the gap that is there in this new crazy world that we live in with so many robots working with us in our writing. So, kind of just wanted to point that out. It is available. Once again, we really recommend leaning more so on authorship rather than just our general AI detector there. But I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Just want to see if there are any questions. I know we went over a lot of material today and a lot of different features. As I mentioned, I will follow up with those resources. We have a what is authorship resource that just kind of details the purpose of the tool. And then we also have an authorship best practices guide that covers a lot of those key points that I mentioned that we want to keep in mind. We want to make sure that we have the right applications downloaded to use authorship. We also want to make sure that we're working within Google Docs or Microsoft Word on desktop. But I will certainly keep you all posted. As soon as we have authorship working in Word Online, you all will certainly know about it and make sure that we have your students aware as well. That way they know everywhere where they can use the tool. But I'm going to go ahead and check the chat and see if we had any questions.
I haven't seen any since the last one.
Perfect.
But could you share any of the helpful links that you've been talking about? And I will
Yes,
I will save them.
perfect. Yes, I absolutely will. I will attach those documents in the follow-up that I send out. I'll make
Perfect.
sure I share those with you, Kim. And again, if there are any questions as you are using Grammarly authorship, if there's anything that's coming about where you're like, I really wish I had a resource for my students that actually detailed this one particular piece of it, I would be happy to put that together for you. I do that all the time. We actually, some of the resources I'll be sending out to you all came about from a particular campus just noticing a gap. I love when I get questions like that because it just helps us be even more prepared moving forward. Just please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about anything. Again, if there are any issues as well with your Grammarly account, I'll also include our support email. But if you're ever waiting on a response or you've been going back and forth and you're not getting the answer you need, again, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to help expedite that process for you. But it was so nice getting to meet with you all. And I'm so excited for your fall semester. And I hope it's off to a wonderful start. But again, if you need anything at all, I will be here.